Bounty hunters have always had a special place in Star Wars. Most of the time when we think about bounty hunters, the Star Wars fandom would think about the Fett lineage and others like Bosk. However, with that being said, there are a plethora of bounty hunters that haven't surfaced quickly enough to the top of the fandom. So on this edition of Who Is, we'll be talking about a particular Imperial pilot turned cyborg human bounty hunter. Who is Beilert Valance? Now before we start, just keep in mind the story of Valance is still being developed as seen in his starring role in the Star Wars Bounty Hunter comic series. There might be a part 2 of this video down the line, and any minor additional details will be added in the description below over time. Beilert Valance was born on the planet Corran at an unspecified time. However, we can assume that Valance was born sometime in and around the Clone Wars. This is evidenced when we see a still young Valance being inspired by stormtroopers that visit Corran during its liberation. The assumption being this liberation happens sometime after Revenge of the Sith, based on the Star Wars canon timeline. Being raised on Corran wasn't an easy life for Valance. Prior to its liberation, the general vicinity of the planet was under harsh slave control of a mining entity that left little to enjoy in day-to-day life. It was here that Valance would become inspired by the Empire at a young age. During the initial reign of the Galactic Empire, the Empire liberated Corran, we assume, to take over the mines for resources. And during its liberation, the Empire's military might paraded throughout the streets to show they succeeded. It was here that a young Valance would encounter the Imperial officer Tarl Sokoli for the first time. During this exchange, the officer inspired a young Valance with words of sympathy, motivation, and encouragement, and it was from here on out that Valance's focus and drive would shift his life forever as he saw the Empire as a way out and a way for a better life. As Valance would go on to leave Corran for a better life, he was still leaving behind a life. Among those were his love interest, Urala Vega, and his parents. With words of strength from his father, and a gem to remember his love interest by, Valance left Corran for good. During his time with the Empire, Valance served in 2 different roles, that of a pilot and that of an infantry person. Valance first entered into the Empire by way of the Academy at Cardia, which was a naval branch. Valance, with his positive impression of the Empire, fit right in. Known as 404913 during his time at the Naval Academy branch, Valance was completely bought into the Empire's soul-crushing prowess, and imposed those qualities at all times. Valance's general beliefs led him to have a general disdain for those who didn't share the same beliefs, like Han Solo, referring to them with expletives and slurs for those less enthusiastic. And though Valance did not enjoy the company of the less enthusiastic, he still benefited from some of their good deeds from time to time. For example, in one particular instance, it was actually Han Solo who saved him during a training incident where he was abandoned. Valance's Imperial career would now start on a spiraling downturn. During one of Valance's first missions, he was shot down while engaging Koshokian fighters, sustaining significant injuries. Valance thought he was left for dead, but was rescued again by Solo and other cadets against the Imperial motto, which didn't entail rescuing those fallen behind. During this moment, we get to see the change in Valance start occurring. As Valance was rescued by Solo and the other soldiers, one soldier decided to actually defect in the presence of Valance. Valance, starting to experience a shift in opinion of the Empire and a personal shift within himself, vowed to essentially never tell anyone about the soldier's defection, allowing that particular soldier to flee the Imperial service forever. Valance's relationship and view of the Empire would further begin to deteriorate when he was notified by the Empire that his injury repair costs would be paid out of pocket by him, and that due to the extent of his injuries, would not be able to fly again. Valance still found a way to give back to the Empire and re-enlisted in the infantry. However, his experience wouldn't be any different. During an assignment on Mimban, Valance sustained more serious injuries while being barraged by a range of blaster fire and eventual seeming artillery fire or otherwise explosive ordnance. It left Valance completely crippled, very similar to how Anakin was left on Mustafar during Revenge of the Sith, burning alive, clinging to the last bit of life. Valance was recovered at that time, and here we truly see his transformation from Valance the person into Valance the cyborg bounty hunter. The Empire this time around did cover the cost of Valance's repairs, giving him enhanced cybernetics, including facial repair that left him in an enhanced human state, as you can see by his face. Some of those modifications, my personal favorites, being the cybernetic eye, which granted him different levels of eyesight, and also a new arm, which came equipped additionally with a cannon, sort of reminiscent of Iron Man. More importantly, they also overhauled a lot of his organs too, including his cardiovascular function. For more specifics and super detailed breakdown on Valance's physical state, I encourage you to check out the links provided below to various sources on that specific topic. After the end of Valance's career with the Empire, he would transition to a life of bounty hunting. But this transition wasn't easy. And as you'll come to know, Valance struggled with his physical state and his past. Not only his past with the Empire, but his past on Corran, and feelings of missing his love interest and his family. So full disclosure, some of these events may be out of order, as the events of the comic Target Vader and the events of Bounty Hunters may overlap, but it's within my knowledge that Target Vader actually occurs before Bounty Hunters. So it was on the planet Eridu that Valance's bounty hunting career would really take a turn, and that's where he first came into contact with Nakano Lash. Ironically, he met Nakano Lash at a bar dispute, and during the dispute, Valance, injured again by stormtroopers, was ultimately saved and repaired by Lash. After this, the two became colleagues, and dare I say friends. Lash would go on to take Valance under her wing, and while working with Lash, Valance also came to work with other notable bounty hunters like Bosk, Fett, and a host of others that we see in the Bounty Hunters comic run. However, the team of bounty hunters wouldn't last very long. During an assassination mission in which the group was hired to assassinate a member of the Unbroken clan, Lash betrayed the employer, the Mourner's Wall Syndicate, and kills the employer out of morality to go against the orders to kill the target, which happened to be a child. However, this child did have some political importance to both factions, which warranted the bounty hunter from their perspective. It was here that the group disbanded, and also where Valance and Fett became sworn enemies. Valance, in his mind, sided with Lash, and Boba vowed to seek compensation for the damage to his wallet and his reputation. After the falling out with the bounty hunter crew, Valance would go from job to job and place to place. Notably, he worked with the Cavenstone crew, only to discover that his target was his old comrade in Han Solo. Now remember when I mentioned that change of heart in Valance? During this instance, we see Valance actually changing. He intentionally misses his shot against Solo and saves Solo's life, sort of repaying him the debt he owed him for all the times he saved him during their Imperial time together. After performing odd ends and odd jobs, Valance's jobs would again hold significance after he was essentially at odds with a bounty hunters guild over stolen bounties and just poor relationships in general. He'd abandoned the lone wolf mentality in order to work with a crime syndicate known as the Hidden Hand, to take out a huge bounty on Darth Vader. It piqued Valance's interest not just for the bounty or for the fame, but simply as a way to get back at the Empire for all the wrong they did to him and to the rest of the galaxy. You see, at some point, Valance reveals that the Imperial soldier that visited him on his planet as a child and inspired him to join the ranks was simply a sham himself, a fake and a fraud. Valance realized over time that the dream he was sold when he was a child on Corran was also a sham, and that it was all fake, and that in the Empire, no one truly had anyone's back, including those fallen, just like he had fallen so many times. So it's worth noting that when Valance partnered with a crime syndicate known as the Hidden Hand, he was also partnering with another bounty hunter named Dengar. As they go to take out Vader, Dengar actually betrays Valance, which lands Valance in the hands of the Empire, captured by his former employer. Dengar does this because the Empire has personal leverage over him. While captured, Valance was tortured for information on the Hidden Hand syndicate that he partnered with, because Vader wanted to find out who was trying to assassinate him. Oddly enough, Valance manages to escape, but during that attempted escape, Vader catches him, and instead of punishing him or killing him, he accompanies him back to his homeworld of Corran, seeking the Hidden Hand with Valance. Ultimately, it became mutually beneficial because Vader wanted the information on the Syndicate and Valance wanted to protect what was left of his people. When returning, Valance saw the destruction of his village and was somber and sad. He knew that the Empire betrayed his village and abandoned them, and Valance felt the same way the miners had abandoned them and left, the Empire did as well, leaving a void for syndicates to come take over and destroy their villages. Vader eventually does get the information out of Valance to find the Hidden Hand Syndicate, and amidst the chaos of battle between Vader and the Syndicate, Valance manages to escape the clutches of Vader, and the credits earned, he actually gives to the rebellion. Ultimately, after this, Valance's adventures continue with him eventually finding a bounty that unknowingly leads him to the bounty target, who is his former colleague, Nakano Lash, who he'd been looking for so long. In his continued search, he'd come to blows with former colleagues like Bosk, among others, who started blaming Valance for Lash's betrayal years prior. And so it seemed that a lot of people pinned deaths, the loss of money, and other assets on Valance directly after Lash. Valance would ultimately find Lash again, but failed to save her from death at the hands of Boba Fett, though he did succeed in part, as he was able to rescue Cordelia, who was with Lash. That was the target that Lash saved all those years ago and betrayed the employers over, this young adult who was politically wanted by both these factions. This story maintains significance for Valance, as he looks for places to have Cordelia cared for. So eventually he goes back to Loic, where the members of his old village from Corran had migrated, including Irala, after the villages were sacked. There he entrusted care of Cordelia once more for safekeeping from the bounty hunters and the syndicate clans, to Urala. However, even though Valance would see his love interest once again, he'd come to find out that she had moved on to someone else. Valance would move on to find more purpose in his life, and he tried to repay his dues by trying to rescue Solo from the clutches of the Hutts and the Empire in the War of the Bounty Hunters comic book run. Valance, even though he comes to blows with Fett a few more times, does eventually entrust him for a mutually beneficial gain that they'd both rescue Han Solo, or recover Han Solo at least. But Fett betrays him, leaving him for dead aboard a Star Destroyer. Valance would actually die aboard that Star Destroyer. But that's not the end. Currently at the present, Valance woke up on that Star Destroyer after the fact, only to find himself a complete cyborg now, with no heart, being informed that he actually did die, but was operated on and brought back to life, with new cybernetic organs, and also now being captured and used again by Vader to do Vader's bidding. So that being said guys, I hope you were able to learn something about Valance today from this Who Is video, including his backstory, what he's been up to, and where his story's going. If you want to learn more about Valance, I recommend checking out the Star Wars Bounty Hunter series, the War of the Bounty Hunters crossover event comic, and Star Wars Target Vader, and any online databases that may have more information within them. I hope you guys enjoy this edition of Who Is. Let me know if there are any other characters you'd like for me to elaborate on. And everyone, thanks again for watching. Your viewership means the world to me. Don't forget to help the channel out. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And remember, the Force will be with you, always.